Today's guest on the podcast is Kevin Kelly. Kevin's been a guest on some of the biggest podcasts there are. Think Tim Ferriss, Modern Wisdom, Rich Roll. He's a TEDx speaker, published author. So it was an absolute honor and pleasure to have him come join us for a conversation. He's the founder and editor of Wired Magazine, lifelong adventurer, an artist at heart, and the author of a number of books, including his most recent one, Excellent Advice for Living. He's been called the most interesting man in the world. And once you hear his stories, you'll know why. In this episode, we're talking all things about taking risks, building things, creating art, finding your passion, and ultimately how to live a life that's truly worth remembering. Let's get into it. So, Kevin, you've lived a life that has taken multiple different paths and directions. I know I've been a big fan of Tim Ferriss, and he's often referred to as being like the most interesting man alive, which is a very nice title to have. And I'm curious for you, like from what you've done with Wired to all your work photographing cultures in Asia, like being a published author, all that. What's been your like North Star to making all those decisions, or like your guiding light in the compass in terms of like deciding where to go next or what to dive into?
Thank you for asking, but I've not really ever had a very deliberate career path. I haven't really, intentionally have a single R that I'm aiming for. There's a couple of little heuristics, a little things that I do remind myself about, and one of the things from a very early age that I was trying to hold on to was I was sort of trading money for control of my time. So I was giving up money. I was giving up a paid career instead of getting control over my time. And I felt that time wealth was more important than cash wealth.
Mhm.
I kind of made that bargain the instant I dropped out of college, because at that time that was a pretty big decision, and I was sort of signing up for a world in which I was never going to have any money, but I was going to have a lot of time. And I felt that was a better bargain. And as I've gone along, I've kind of tried to engineer my life to really have kind of control over that. Even at Wired, I had this really weird role where I did not report to anybody and nobody reported to me. So that was the kind of, again, I didn't want my time taken up by mandatory meetings and management and stuff like that. So that's been, I guess, one thing that I've kept in my mind as I went along.
With that bargain, the deal with the devil, less cash, more time sort of thing, was there much, I don't know, pushback, or did you have many people in your ear, like I'm thinking parents or older people, trying to like force you back on the more traditional path, let's call it?
Actually, I didn't. My parents were the first people in their families to go to college. We went to a very college prep town, and I think they moved to that town because the education was good. I had a class of maybe 700 people. I think all of them went to college. And so there was a lot of expectations, but my parents kind of understood pretty early on that I was marching to my own drum, that I was going my own way, not in a kind of FU way, much like I'm just sort of, I didn't need a lot of outside approval. I was very much inner driven, very confident, and I just sort of was going along, doing my thing, making my stuff, not really caring too much what other people thought about it. And so that was just sort of me, and I was doing my things, my photography, later on my travel, and they were kind of, they're worried about the usual things about getting sick or whatever. They didn't, what's the word? They didn't maybe understand it, but they didn't oppose it. And so from my perspective, they did the right thing. They never gave me any money for it. It was entirely, I paid for everything myself. All through life, I didn't really have very much money in high school. I didn't have a job, so I just didn't have any money. So they never really subsidized it or paid for it, but
Yeah.
it didn't, I mean, they eventually became proud of it, but it took a while to kind of have anything that looked like an achievement.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were very proud that I was, I mean, when I was traveling in Asia at that time, there was like nobody else doing that.
I can imagine, yeah.
And when I rode my bike across the US, even at that time, there was nobody, bikes were not a thing at that time. So it was kind of like there was a little parental pride in that your son is doing these sort of crazy things.
Mm-hmm,
That
mm-hmm.
are kind of crazy in that sense. But I never had real resistance from
Yeah.
people. And I probably wouldn't have paid much attention to it.
More importantly, I can imagine your parents going to, I don't know, a little dinner or something like, oh, how's Kevin getting on? What's Kevin up to? And they're like, oh, let me
Oh
tell you.
yeah, in the Himalayas, climbing mountains. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Deadly, deadly. When it comes to like the decisions you made, dropping out of college, traveling around the US, Asia, sorry, cycling across the US, doing all those things, did they feel like risks at the time for you? Was it like weighing up
Uh,
the pros and cons, or was it this is what I feel like doing? I'm gonna do it.
no, I have a very natural and I consider fairly healthy and very significant aversion to danger. And so I would avoid places that seem to me to be dangerous, war torn or liable for personal injury or whatever. So I was very cautious. And, I that doesn't prevent me. I got hepatitis, viral hepatitis, which was not good,
Yeah.
but that was really the only illness I had or accident. And so I think you can still have a fantastic time in life and doing things if you, are cautious. And I would say one thing in my 50 years of traveling and hearing stories of people who've had troubles, I would say there was a really high correlation between the troubles they had and alcohol, meaning they were drinking, the
Okay.
other people were drinking, happened at a bar, whatever it is. There's something, there was just, and I don't drink. And so that eliminates
So it's a hedge downside, yeah.
percent of the dangers and possibilities of something going wrong. And so, it could be something like, they were hanging out with some people drinking and they fell asleep and they were pickpocketed, whatever it is. It's just, there was just this association that if I didn't drink, which I did, those were eliminated in terms of my own experiences with traveling around the world.
So that kind of ties in nicely then to the second piece of that, because like you mentioned here around a natural aversion to taking risks or a lack of aversion to taking
Yeah.
risks, like
Well,
embodying that.
well, well, I mean, I would say injurious risks, what I would call unnecessary risk. I would take plenty
Yep.
of other kind of risks, meaning like trusting strangers, going places where it might seem you didn't know what would happen next. So
Yep.
there was a certain amount of risks. It's just that I was very cautious about bodily injury type of risks.
Understood. And on the flip side of risk, I look at like regret. And what
Yeah.
role would you say regret has, if any, played in your life and all those decisions?
I have very, very, very few regrets. I regret that we didn't kind of plan a little better and have a fourth child. I think you should have as many kids as you possibly can. You won't regret those. We had no regrets about that. I think I regret that I was maybe a more conscious as a kid in high school. I mean, I just always
Okay.
felt that I was not fully aware of what was going on, but I don't know what I could have done.
Yeah.
Maybe been more
Ayahuasca or
equal
mushrooms.
to teacher, maybe be more grateful. But by and large, I don't have many regrets, and it's not a motivating factor. I don't think about the past very much. I don't have a very good memory of it. I'm much more present and then future oriented in terms of my own life. And so I hear that there are people who have a little voice that nags them about things in the past. And for some reason, am absent that. So it's not something that motivates me very much at all.
You clearly followed your own path in life. You mentioned earlier
Right.
marching to the beat of your own drum. From your perspective, was there anyone you took inspiration from, like any role models or people that inspired that in you?
Yeah, when I was growing up, there wasn't very much around. I didn't have an older brother or even older kids in the neighborhood. I was the eldest, and Henry David Thoreau's Walden was very influential. He was my hero in high school, and he did talk about marching to a different beat and kind of following your own path. And I find that really, really inspirational. Building your own home, taking control. And for me, he was he was the role model. Of course, I didn't meet him. He was a figure, a
Mm-hmm.
fictional figure, just about. But that was a North Star for a while. Was not like imitating him, but just sort of taking his lessons, taking his life lessons to heart, and trying to do things myself. Have those experiences, have that kind of control over your life. And so later on, I was very influenced by Stuart Brand at the Whole Catalog, which preached a very similar kind of lesson about doing it yourself, about having permission to create your own life. And there was a bunch of other people who were brought in who were living today and doing this. And they became my role models, and Stuart became my role model. And then eventually I decided that was the only place I really wanted to have a job. And eventually that was basically my first job. My first real job was working with Stuart. And so his influence on me is just immense, tremendously powerful. And even today, after working with him for 40 years, my admiration for him continues to increase. So
Right.
you can't say that about a lot of your heroes when you meet them. And for me, as I said, he's been my hero, and I have even more respect for him. So he was the second really influential person on me in terms of his character as well as his ideas and his approach to life. And like whenever we do something, he really stressed on trying to make allies rather than enemies all the time. And, he has a habit of not repeating himself and trying to say something different each time, even though you're talking about the same thing. This kind of freshness. There was just so many aspects of him and his life that I really was influenced by.
Yeah, there's something about those characters, and I'll put you in the same bucket. I don't know if you put yourself, but I'll put you in the same bracket as them. And it comes back to my favorite quote of yours, which is "Don't aim to be the best, aim to be the only." That whole thing of one of one, not one of many sort of thing. And I want to tie this back into something you mentioned earlier, because you've done it, and a few people who I've spoken to have done it. And as a man who has no kids yet, well, I have a dog, golden retriever, who is as much of a baby as I can imagine a human baby. But you mentioned kids and like how a regret, we'll call it that, is not having more, and you should aim to have as many as possible. And they're only an addition to life. Purely asking for my own sake, what has having kids added to your life, and cause you to speak so highly?
Yeah, having kids used to be the default, and now you have to make very conscious decisions. And nobody has really yet written the selfish reasons to have children.
Here we go.
I don't know if I'm able to do it either, but there are selfish reasons to have kids, and and they go from, just as you have, if you have pets, about the bond that you have with them and the joy of being with them. So that's fun. I just did a walk. My son's 29, I guess. He's my youngest.
Okay.
He lives in New York, and he joined me on a walk of the last 100 kilometers in the El Camino de Santiago, Spain, with a bunch of friends, and he was there. And the joy of doing something with your adult child is just really, really very, very high. I don't have a twin, but my son is probably, other than my brothers, is very closely genetically related, and there's some ease at being around people like that.
Yeah.
So I have two daughters too, and so we just enjoy being around. So there's the pleasure of their company. That is hard, and all through their lives, when they're young, different ages, there is the pleasure. There is the pleasure of guiding them and teaching them, informing them, and helping them, which is not just hanging out with them, but the pleasure of kind of creating a force in the world for good.
Yep.
There is the anticipated benefit that many friends report, that as they get older, their kids can help them. They can care for them in some ways, even if they aren't physically present. Just going and just being in their lives. And so that's the third kind of reason, selfish reason. And I think there is also the joy or the pleasure of doing things as a group, as a family, the family unit, the rituals that you have as a family, the family rituals, the Thanksgiving stuff, the Seder, the Sabbaths, whatever it is that you're doing as a family, as a unit, the vacation house you go to every summer or whatever, doing that as a group, you have kind of an expanded identity, and that family identity is very important. And then I guess last thing is you do have an identity as a parent, as a father.
Yeah.
That is an additional what's the word I want? Refuge, or
Mm.
somewhere where you can, it's an accomplishment that you
Yeah.
can sit on, because no matter whether you're a good father or a bad father, you're a father. So you have fatherness as a anchor
Mm.
in your life and or motherhood. So um, I would say that's the fifth selfish reason to have kids.
Feel another book on the horizon here, Kevin. You're selling it to me. I'm selling. But no, I'm hearing what you're saying, and even
Uh-huh.
the way you framed it in some of that, like the one that stuck with me there was like helping to nurture a force for good in the world,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like I never even thought of it like that,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, but I can see the significance of that. Is it's powerful. And with the, how many kids is it you've got?
We have 3 kids, two daughters. My oldest daughter has 2 children of her own, so I am
Okay.
a grandparent. And then there's these kind of cascading interests. So you're now influencing another generation. There's I guess maybe I should say that's the sixth pleasure is, if you have children, you have the grandchildren, and you get to do the whole thing again. It's a slightly different relationship being grandparents. But I have my closest friends has 22 grandchildren,
Oh,
and
that's a lot of birthdays.
he has a lot of birthday, lots of fuss, and yeah, lots of joy for his
Yes, yeah.
for him. It's all very, very pleasurable. So I would say, yeah, that's maybe the sixth level is you have the opportunity to have the joys of grandparenting.
You mentioned your youngest is 29, me and Leah
Yeah,
26, so we're not too far apart. I'd
sure,
imagine the
sure.
grandkids are a lot a lot younger than that.
Yeah.
But let's say kids of like today's age, growing up this generation, all the pros and cons, etc. That quote, "Don't aim to be the best, aim to be the only." How do you think that relates to like growing up as a young person in today's world?
Yeah, I think there are more or different challenges now
Mhm.
growing up. If I take my grandchildren, the oldest is 3-ish, 3.5, and so we didn't have to wrestle with the issues of like social media with our kids growing up. We did. Our kids did grow up without TV,
Oh,
and
okay.
it was not an issue at the time. And later on, they did thank us for that, for avoiding the TV. Now we were the first to have Netflix, the discs in our
Okay.
neighborhood and online stuff. So we saw lots of, Disney movies and things, but we weren't connected and having to see it on schedule with advertising. That's what we avoided with the ads, and then we could see it on our own schedule. And there was some kind of stuff that we just didn't see at all. But that was a gift to them. And so I think our understanding is you want to kind of regulate access to social media depending on age and other issues. So, but it would still be kind of a tough thing to navigate through. I ask a lot of people who have young children today or teens what their policies are, and they range all over
I can
from
imagine. Yeah, yeah.
they have full access to everything to like, no, we completely regulate what access they have to the screen. So that's a pretty wide gamut of policies that
Yeah.
weren't present when our kids were growing up. Most people had TV, and the kids sometimes had TV in the bedrooms and stuff. So we have some similarities about that, but it would be a little tougher to kind of have to navigate some of these issues today. But I don't think they're impossible. And again, I think there are emerging best practices. Now some schools require the kids to surrender their phones when they go into the school,
Yeah.
and they have little bags to put them in and stuff. And I think that's a pretty reasonable thing. So there are some differences, but I still think that there are also plenty of more new opportunities to help your child become the only.
Like the only. What a phrase. What does a day in the life of Kevin Kelly look like nowadays?
I don't have a routine. I like to do things in batches, as you might have understood from Claudia, like this is the week for podcasts. So I'll do all the podcasts all together, and I find it less disruptive. And I enjoy this time. I'm enjoying right now. This is really great fun for me. Then I'll have another week where I may be doing mostly art, and I'll have another week where I'm working on a piece of writing. And so I'm not much of a routine person. Tend to do things, I guess, little spurts and then do something else. I may work on AI for a while and then go into the workshop and make some art with my hands or go for a walk I often, when people meet, I will like to take a walk rather than sit. So we'll like, yeah, come at 1 o'clock and we'll do a walk along the beach or up in the hills. So I'll do those kinds of things. But I don't really have a routine.
You mentioned to do a bit of art in the workshop. Is that piece behind you? Is that a Kevin Kelly original? Or
No, I have a lot of art here, including my little trains around the ceiling. But this is the Mississippi River. And the white is the current Mississippi River, and these are all archaic geological meanders of the Mississippi River as it goes through the valley in geological time. And I found this at the Army of Engineers. I found some PDFs and I stitched them together and printed out this modern art version of the geological map.
I love it. The creativity in those no bounds.
So I have a big Lego wall here, and then up there you can see the little town. That's where my electric train goes by. I made a bridge. I've got all my 2-story library, and my posters and stuff. So yeah, art. It's a big thing, important for me. Being creative, and art I define as something that's cool and useless.
It sounds a bit like how my missus would describe me.
Yeah, you're a piece of art. Yeah. So I do a lot of cool and useless stuff, and the joy is in the making of it, not necessarily even the final end product.
What you've said there is a message of absorb so much. I read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, and he pushes on a very similar sort of topic and theme of the purpose of creation and art is not about what the observer thinks it's going to be or how they respond. It's the enjoyment of the process of creating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to write about something called the audience of one, which is that particularly with AI, the act of creation is becoming so easy. There's 50 million AI generated images a day. 50 million, and 99.99% of those are never shared, never seen by anybody other than the co-creator. And the purpose of them is in the act of co-creating them, is in the pleasure of making them, finding them, bringing them into existence. And we're now headed into the period where people are going to be making entire movies in a few minutes, and 99 by the millions. Full-length feature movies in the millions of them a day. Most of them will never be shared. They're just in the pleasure of the co-creator, and they're the ones who enjoy it the most and don't really need to share. Occasionally there'll be one that they think is amazing and they'll share, but for most of it there's not even attention. It's like journaling. It's like sketching in your sketchbook. It's writing in your diary. It's the process of making it that is the point.
Yeah, the limits or lack of limits with AI and where that's headed is scary and inspiring at the same time, depending on where you look at it and how you utilize it. But what it's opening up in terms of opportunities, we spoke earlier about for younger people growing up and, social media and all the rest, the AI side of things and what that will enhance their abilities to do and be a positive force for good, like we spoke about earlier. I mean, it's a very interesting time for sure. So Kevin, I know you've got a lot of interest and attachment to Asia and that side of the world, and something that I was really curious just to ask you about was, I don't know if you guys in the States feel a similar sort of way or pick up on similar things, but for me in Ireland, and certainly the environments I've grown up in, the people I've grown up around, it almost always felt like there was some form of like an arrogance of the West sort of thing when it came to like Europe and what we can do and create compared to Asia and what exists in that part of the world for multiple reasons. You're someone who has hands on the ground, experience, feet on the ground. I was curious, what's something that you think we can take away from the Asian cultures, what they do, how they live, and apply to the West that we're overlooking?
It's a really fair question. I think I think there was a small. I think there was a significant inferiority complex from many Asian countries since the colonial. I could say the last
Yeah.
200 years, because at one time they were the center of the world. They were the leaders of culture, and most things were invented in China hundreds of years before they were invented in the West. However, I would say in recent years, part of what we're feeling right now is the Chinese don't have that inferiority complex. They're very much feeling like they are, um, you know, they are the center of what's
Yes.
happening.
Yeah. I get you.
So I think what I've taken away from Asia is, one, at least in recent times, the Asians have been much more optimistic than the West has been. Much more optimistic. They're very, because they have seen within their lifetimes only betterment.
True.
Okay. So the change that some of the people living in, say, almost any Asian country, is the change in their lifetime is just hard to imagine, because they were living sometimes in medieval times. It wasn't just like a change. This is a change of centuries. This is like going from the 1500s
Yeah.
to 2025. I mean, like, from living in villages without electricity or plumbing to living in some of the biggest, most futuristic cities on the planet. It's an incredible change. They were going from places where they had infanticide. They were practicing infanticide until now they've got holograms. It's really mind-boggling. So they're very optimistic, and so some of that optimism has rubbed off on me. And then the other thing that I think Asian cultures tend to do, and they're much more collectivist, much more group oriented, much more concerned about the welfare of the group, not just the welfare of the individual. There is definitely a virtue to Americans in the West, but particularly Americans' extreme individualism, but it needs to be tempered with a little bit more group concern, right? A little bit more thinking about we're not just individuals. We are definitely, members of a society, and we have to have the commons. We have to have the commonwealth.
Yeah.
And so the Asians are maybe at the other extreme in some cases of being maybe too concerned about the group.
Okay.
We can certainly become a little bit more group oriented, group concerned. And so that's the second thing. And then the third thing is because the Asians are very aware. They see themselves in terms of a long history, very long history. American history is like nothing. It's a couple hundred years. So because they have a long history, they tend to have a little bit longer view of everything in general. A little bit, not just thinking about the next 5 minutes or the next quarter.
Yeah.
And I think that longer horizon is, to me, very tied to wisdom. That's kind of what wisdom is. Wisdom is being able to take a longer view of things. And so there's a little bit more, can oftentimes be a little bit more wisdom present, because they're taking a much longer view of things past and future. And they'll really consider multiple generations, what's going to happen in future generations. And so those are three things for me that I think Asia has taught me. I'm making sweeping generalizations, but
of course, but
it's kind of in an abstract way.
Yeah, no, I get it, and it reflects a lot. Like, even when I think of Asian culture, obviously it's a generalization, but think like Buddhist culture, and like how that is something that so many people in the West almost start to aspire to a certain stage. Like, I need to meditate, I need to find peace, I need to come back to these, grounding myself and centering myself again, and that collectivism and all the rest. I understand it's a spectrum of, maybe the West could be too far on the individual side and other place might be too far on the other side, but that space in the middle, where, going back to a lesson you learned early on from a mentor you mentioned, trying to make allies and not enemies, and bringing everyone up together and all that sort of stuff. It's an interesting part. And for you, Kevin, now at this stage of life, having done everything you've done and been all over the place, I'm curious, what is it that keeps you excited today? What kind of stuff do you love doing that keeps you feeling vibrant and looking forward to getting up in the morning?
Yeah, I'm still a maker. I've been a maker all my life. I still enjoy that part of my life of making stuff, making art, fixing things, creating little whatever it is, doing repairs, making things that are cool and useless, including that, making YouTube videos and that are just for my pleasure. Maybe they're useful to others, doing the podcast. So I have a bunch of stuff that I involved in creating. I just did another book. Where is it? I can't remember. I did another book. I'm working on that. It's a book of, it's Asia arranged by color. And so
Okay.
I thought it was right. Oh, here it is there. And so that's not the final cover, but it's all these images of Asia, like all the reds.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you have all the yellows or all the blues, and it's kind of a weird little way, but I just find it fun. And so I'm publishing this book. I spent a lot of time making it. Now we're doing the printing of it and all that kind of stuff. So for me, making stuff, sharing things, writing is just part of the mix of things. And I get what's the word I want? It's a compulsion. Again, I'm not doing it for money because there's not much money involved in these things. There's no kind of real economic reason to do it. We have a newsletter. I have my newsletter Recommendo, which is we do every week.
I'm a
It doesn't
subscriber.
really make money, but I just like doing it and sharing. And so I have all those kinds of things that I'm kind of keeping going. And my main business is going to China and giving talks to China about technology. That's my business.
Okay.
And so I go to China a lot. Most of my fans are in China. I'm really big in China. I have a book coming out only in Chinese next month about the future of China. And so those kinds of things keep me going. The main, another joy is trying to stay on the frontier, trying to keep up with frontiers, trying to identify and report back from the frontiers wherever they are. That's something that just gives me joy. So I'll go to conferences or whatever to kind of sniff out what's happening here. Is this something that might stick around? Is this
Yeah.
going to happen? I was doing that with like Burning Man. So Burning Man was something that I was really early to. In fact, last year I did an installation at Burning Man. I did a big art installation.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was a partner. It was a mile-long row of strobe lights, 1 mile long, on the east-west axis that flashed in unison with the rotation of the Earth. So you could feel the Earth rotating.
Right. Okay.
And you'd see the light coming down. It takes about 4.5 seconds to go down the mile, and you could feel that was the Earth rotating under you. So the idea was to experience the Earth rotation. It's called Speed of the Earth, and it was solar-powered LEDs with a GPS thing. It was very high-tech to set them up, and that was a really cool and useless piece of where, I mean, it was cool. It was just definitely
Yeah,
cool.
that's cool.
You could feel the Earth rotating. So those kinds of things, Burning Man itself is sort of this thing that everybody should go to at least once in your life. It's like the pyramids, the Grand Canyons. Videos don't capture it, and
Okay.
that's kind of the frontier stuff that I like to seek out. And so whether there's something happening in AI right now, which I'm spending a lot of time, full-time reading and trying to keep up with AI, and or the biomed stuff happening. So that's my other joy is trying to surf the frontier.
I like it. So have kids, make art, go to Burning Man. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you got your assignment. That's your assignment.
Yeah.
Here.
Beautiful. Kevin, thank you so much for your time, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. I was going to say this podcast feels like a work of art, but it wasn't useless. It was cool and useful. A slight variation there. But thank you so much for your time. If you're ever around this part of the world in Dublin and you fancy a pint of Guinness, let us know. I'd be more than happy to meet up and grab it.
You're very, very welcome. I appreciate it. People can find more about me at my initials, kk.org. And if you're interested in our little newsletter, Recommendo, with one N, recommendo.com, it's a one-pager every Sunday morning with the stuff that we recommend, which could be someone to follow, book to read, movie to watch, place to go to, destination, app to put on your phone, whatever. So happy to send that to you.
Beautiful. We'll link all that in the show notes so people can find it and get on. I actually am a subscriber to recommend them myself, and
Okay, there you go.
yeah, I usually it comes in about 10, half 10 on a Sunday morning. So typically I'm in the gym, like walking on the treadmill or something when it comes on, and it's a nice little read through. Some like absolutely random stuff that you're like, will I ever need this in life? And then you read more about it, you're like, actually, yeah, I think I do need that. So the links are all there for like if it's an Amazon product or whatever else, you can click through and just go grab it. So would definitely recommend checking that one out.
I appreciate you guys and your wonderful questions. Thank you for your interest. And I wish you the best. Top of the morning.
Appreciate it, Kev. Thank you very much. Look after yourself.
Bye-bye.